If you're an HR professional who works hard to fill roles within your company, keep employees engaged, and build company culture, welcome to America Back to Work, where dreams only work if we do. We'll share wide-ranging issues surrounding pre-employment background screening, HR topics such as recruiting, hiring, labor trends, and company culture, as well as broader HR-influenced business topics such as customer experience, service level excellence, and protecting what matters through best practices in prevention, protection, and corporate security. America Back to Work is brought to you by S2 Verify. Here's your host, Arnette Heintze.
Welcome to America Back to Work, brought to you by S2 Verify, where our purpose is to help you hire with confidence and manage insider risk. I'm your host, Arnette Heintze. Thank you for joining. Today, our guest is Sheri Bender. Sheri is the founder of Pulse HR Solutions and also serves as an adjunct faculty member and curriculum designer in human resources education at James Madison University. Now, that's a lot. Sheri, thank you for joining us today. And I'm intrigued by the fact that you both teach and practice HR. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you split your time up between these really critical initiatives?
Well, I have been with Pulse HR for January will be 7 years, and the JMU adjunct role is actually new. I was just recruited there for a grant position actually back earlier this year in 2023 by the program where I actually received my master's degree and my undergraduate minor. And so that was really exciting. And I guess that means I'm seasoned, as you could say, because they saw me as a subject matter expert in the area. And so my full-time gig is the consulting, and that is just something that I do really for fun and to give back because, you know, it's really fun to see that go full circle, something that you studied way back when, and then to come back and actually redesign the curriculum and then teach the curriculum to future generations and even asynchronous to adult learners. And so that has just been, it's been really a great year in doing that and, you know, contributing in that way and seeing it from a different perspective. So we can talk more about that, you know, in a further question if you'd like. But, you know, my philosophy in my consulting is, it's not my tagline, but kind of what I go by is improving workplaces question by question, because whether I'm conducting an audit, rewriting a handbook, performing executive coaching or leadership development or even employee development with training, you know, it seems like there's always questions involved, whether it be to an open audience or digging deeper in that personal coaching session. And so it's really an opportunity to scale and impact workplaces at really a larger level than when I was in an HR practitioner role, because you just never know when you ask a question, how that's going to impact somebody's life and ultimately the workplace. So I just feel like, you know, after so many years in HR and different organizations, that it's just really a great way to give back through consulting and also through the facilitation and, you know, teaching.
I do believe you're our first professional that's in the business as well as in the educational side of it. And can you share with our audience what elements really got you focused into HR? What attracted you to the field?
Well, it's quite by accident. And, you know, I don't know, you know, how many people you talk to in the HR arena, probably a lot in your business. And I have found through the years that a lot of people fall into HR by accident. I was actually originally at JMU to be an elementary music teacher, which thank goodness, you know, the course changed because I may not have my two lovely children who are preteens now. And ultimately ended up changing very quickly from that field. But through friends, was recruited to work as an HR assistant at a large manufacturing facility here in Harrisonburg, and was like, oh my goodness, like, I want to do this. You all get to talk to people all day. You're very busy. No day is the same. And so that's actually how I decided that I wanted to work in HR as a career, and then was very fortunate throughout my career to just, you know, call it serendipity or chance to almost be recruited by different professionals that I knew, or jobs that were open, or board members, or just, you know, being at the right place at the right time. And my husband works in the federal government system, and so we are not at a place where we could move. And so I kind of built my career through my experiences in different roles that I accepted, knowing that I wanted to be a consultant ultimately.
Oh,
And so, it's just worked out. It's really a beautiful patchwork quilt of my career, and have been very fortunate to be able to do this for the last 7 years, and was very lucky to be doing consulting prior to COVID. And that just, when the world changed, it made it very easy to start doing the remote work. So HR chose me. I didn't really choose HR, but I'm very thankful.
yeah. Well, I have to believe that being on the educational front of all things HR, you probably see trends start to develop in this industry. And how, when you see these trends start to develop, do you also see it catch back up in your consulting world?
Oh, absolutely. Like, when trends happen, the clients will be asking, what do you recommend on this? Like right now, one of the hot topics, at least that I'm seeing, is the challenge with the remote versus hybrid work. And, how are we going to deal with getting employees back to the office? The Society for Human Resource Management just recently released an article that, within the next 3 years, CEOs predict that all workers are going to be back in the office. And, I'm just not realistically sure that that's really what's going to happen, because so many employees, have adjusted or moved, et cetera. And so managing that, on the front lines is not realistic at this point. Another issue is AI, artificial intelligence, and we're dealing with that in the classroom as well. And so, that dance, if you will, is very interesting, being in this dual role right now. And so I'm getting information on both sides and seeing different perspectives, because AI can be helpful when used properly, but then there are also some concerns with it. So, yes, it's very interesting.
So as part of your consulting practice, I know you offer assessments and coaching to executives on best practices. What are some of the common problems that you're seeing? I know you mentioned the remote issue, which we discussed quite a bit over the last year, and that's certainly a reality for everybody. Are there some other areas that you can highlight that get you involved with?
Sure. Well, a lot of my work starts with new clients. I do a lot of auditing, or assessments. Auditing seems a little bit scary to people, but I call it an HR assessment or an HR audit, and then also mirror the same in the DEI area, because a lot of companies start things and then it's very difficult to follow it through. And so I'll start by giving you an overview of an HR audit or assessment. And that is really a great service for any size organization, because it gives you a nice kind of roadmap, if you will, of all the things that you should be doing based on your size of organization, where you're located, no matter what state you operate in or how many states you operate in. And it looks at what you're doing really well and the areas that you probably should pay a little bit better attention to. And you get a really nice comprehensive report of, how those things should be playing out in your organization, whether you're doing it properly or not currently. And so I like to tell potential clients, when we talk about that product, if your HR team or person or office manager, whoever is currently filling that role of HR, were to win the lottery and not show up on Monday, you could take that report or that book, and I do like this if it's printed, but obviously it's electronic, and someone could come in and build HR properly for you. So it's a really great resource, to start with that audit. And even if you think your HR is top notch, there's usually things in there that have either changed, because right now, so many states are changing these leave laws, which you've probably heard about before, the sick and safe or mini FMLA, and just layering on with the federal requirements. And so all of that changes so quickly that it's very tough for one HR person to keep up with, or even a team, or let's be honest, even the attorneys, keeping up with the changes so quickly. And so it provides a nice, template for you to get it up to date, at least at this moment. And so that's a really nice way to kind of introduce, HR without me being from Department of Labor or OSHA, that I could potentially assess fines to an organization. And then they can decide, recommendation wise, what they want to put their priorities to, or say, oh, thank you for the recommendation, but no, thank you. We're not going to do that or fix that right now. So it's a nice tool for organizations to look at that HR assessment, and it looks at everything. It's very comprehensive, from recruiting to offboarding to state laws and regulations to benefits. It's the whole 9 yards. And then a DEI assessment is very similar, but it looks at your cultural assessments. It looks at your employee focus groups. It looks at your culture in general, hiring practices, even how you pay and promote people, and access to like educational opportunities and things like that. Now, if you're new to starting any type of diversity or inclusion type, work, then it would be a little bit different strategy. But it kind of looks at, where are you short term? Where do you want to be long term with your diversity and inclusion activities? And then, legally, and best practice wise, what does that look like, as far as what people are doing in general and all the different metrics that you could put in place to kind of measure that over time.
Yeah. So I know that, working with organizations around problems of workplace culture captures a lot of your time. And can you share with us a little bit of that process and how you go about assessing the issues in workplace?
Well, if it's just, a new client or someone that I've been working with and, they're like, we really don't know what's going on. We've had a lot of turnover. Morale seems lower than what it's been in a couple of years, or maybe it's shifted over the last 6 months. Then usually it involves, not so much an assessment or audit. It may just be more, talking with the leadership team or the frontline leaders. For example, this week I was working with an organization and they have had turnover in HR. And so we had a meeting with the middle managers, just to kind of have a focus group or a discussion around what truly is HR in that organization. How do they see it? How has it been useful? What would they like to see in the HR department? And come to find out, because my partner in the organization, the CFO, has only been there for 4 months. And come to find out, they didn't really know what HR was. They saw it as a payroll benefits function only, very tactical. And they had a temp in there for like the last 6 months, and that person was kind of, not very responsive. They were lucky if they got an email from the person. And so, they relied on, that person to help them if they had a difficult conversation with an employee, how to handle it. And so there's a lot of foundational work to do to even professionalize HR. And that group of 13 was saying, we haven't even had leadership training. Like, we're not even sure how to deal with difficult conversations. And so really, I recommend if an opportunity presents, talking to the people who are on the front lines to find out, what are their challenges? What do they really like about working there? Like, that was the first question I asked the group. Like, what do you like about working here? How would you describe the culture? And, they didn't know me. They haven't met me. But the CFO was sitting there in the room, and I asked them, I was like, are you more comfortable talking to me with him here, or would you like for him to leave? Because we want to get your honest opinions. And so that's the approach that I usually take, is very open, honest, and, just kind of asking them, because if people don't feel comfortable, they're not going to give you their honest opinions. And I learned a long time ago from a really good leader that if possible, it's better to talk to people than to just send out surveys. And that might not be possible in every size organization or with the remote virtual that we live in today. But we could do Zoom if needed, because if we allow a survey, it's just really easy. And I'll use this example. It's really easy to say, well, it really stinks working here. You could write that. And then we don't have the opportunity to say, well, what does it smell like? How often does it stink? Oh my goodness, does it stink more over here or does it stink more over here? Whereas if we're talking to somebody, we can really get those details, and we can really show interest. And so for me, it's really about, again, question by question, making an impact in that culture. And so hopefully that gives you an example of the way I like to do business.
Absolutely. Now, the data that you get from your workplace culture investigations, are there certain rubrics you're looking for that you use? And
So I usually recommend, if we are looking at, time over time data, that if you're not currently collecting any type of metrics or information, that we start small so that it's measurable, that you aren't spending hours and hours trying to pull information together, because then you're going to get frustrated and it's going to be data overwhelm. And so, it really depends on specifically what we're looking at and what we're building. But I always like to use dashboards and colors. And I know that, colors may not be accessible for everyone. And so we want to be mindful of that. So, it's usually something where we have the number in there and then also the color rating so that it's visual and also, numerical visual. And then, we can show the progress over time. We share that with leadership regularly. And regularly may be monthly for some, it may be quarterly, it may be every 6 months, whatever makes sense for the organization. And then we also share that with the employees, because so often, we go out with an initiative and we say, we're going to do this. And then crickets, people don't hear anything.
Mhm.
And, I think in some places, employees are kind of accustomed to that, and that's where we fall short. And so if we're going to do this and measure it and expect things to be successful, there needs to be follow-up. And so you can do that through numbers, and it's very easy to see trends. And so I usually recommend 1 to 3 measurements to start with, and then you can build from there if you're successful with keeping up with that.
Yeah. So, I have to imagine in some of your findings, there are some really easy fixes. And then there are some that maybe you can't fix. Can you provide some insight into each of these? What are the things that companies can do easy to get the company and the culture back on track? And then what are those things that you go, oh, I don't think we can help here?
I'll give you a story about one organization that I worked with, and this one happened to be remote, and they were really excited about some of their initiatives, and they had implemented like employee resource groups, and their employees were very passionate about helping out with like planning employee activities post-COVID to start getting people back engaged with each other. And so, typically events and like monthly focus things fall on, HR or different groups like that. But this organization actually had an employee group that was coming together, and they wanted to focus on this. And the participation had dropped off, and the leaders were perplexed about this. The CEO just was like, I don't know, they wanted to do this. And now, people have dropped like flies. And for the last 3 months, we haven't had any employee events. And so I talked to a few of the committee members, and they were like, I'm just too busy. We've had some turnover in the department. And one person said, well, it just became too much because they weren't paying us for it. And so I went back to the CEO and I was like, well, it's kind of a misnomer. Like, you don't have to really pay them for that. But, if you're expecting them to do this work, it would be nice if you could pay them. And they were like, oh, we never really thought about that. And so they flipped the policy and they said that they would pay them. And it was amazing. It was like they got new volunteers and people were re-energized around the committee, and they decided to break it into 2 smaller committees. And so it was almost like, that saying of you're too close to the forest, you can't see the trees or something like that. And so sometimes you do things and you just don't know what you don't know. So having somebody that's not really in it or a neutral person to go to could sometimes help you figure things out. So it was like they were doing really good work, but the oversight wasn't there or something. And so that's a story that's an easy fix.
Mm-hmm.
Some things that aren't really the easiest to fix is just when there's so many things that, you almost don't have the foundation there at all. Like when you go in and do, I'll use the example of the HR audit again. And you just, you have a handbook that hasn't been updated in the last 15 years. Well, in 15 years, a lot of changes for, legally have changed for what organizations need to do. When you don't have orientation or onboarding to even tell them, new employees, what the expectations are. And there are organizations, there's probably people listening that say, oh, really? There's, people have these basics.
No.
No, there are actually companies out there that just, they don't have these basics in place. And so when an audit is conducted and there's just so many things that are missing, it's almost like you just have to peel back the layers of the onion and say, okay, we need to prioritize where we're going to start and what you as the organization are willing to devote time to and commit to. And, we can build this from scratch because we're looking at basically a start over process. And that may involve me continuing on or, the organization identifying another external third party to partner with, which is totally fine. But it's just a lot when that happens. And it does happen.
Yeah. So when you're coaching a team or teams with issues around culture, what are some of the techniques you can suggest for them to identify these are the changes we need to make and how we work around here and how we treat one another? And what are some of those techniques?
Mm-hmm. So sometimes it involves like doing an assessment independently. It really depends on the vibe or like the deterioration of the team when we start, like where we are. Sometimes if they're up for it or they've advanced to the part to where they can talk to each other, it can be an open dialogue. I mean, eventually the team, if they are going to advance to the point to where they are moving forward past the conflict stage, then, they do need to get to the point where they can have those eyeball to eyeball conversations about what they need from each other and how they agree to address that conflict or that disagreement. And so depending on where you start in the process, it could be an open dialogue where, I'm doing the whiteboarding of saying, let's talk about where we are now, like what creates conflict. And so, it's very transactional. It's very, I'm the facilitator per se, because when I have the coach hat on, I see myself as more of a partner. If you can imagine hiking, not a difficult hike, but, a walk in the woods. I see myself anytime I'm coaching as the person holding the flashlight onto the path. And whoever's in the coaching arena, they know what they want or what they need or what the goal is. And my job is to listen really well and ask the questions or do the reflection with the mirror so that they can uncover or unlock the solution or whatever it is that they're looking for or seeking. And so if it's one person or if it's a group, my job really is to facilitate by asking the questions or presenting the activities so that they can navigate through that to get to the other side.
Yeah. So if an organization really wants to be proactive and improve workplace cultures before they arise, and what's your recommendations there?
Oh, I always tell, leaders at any class or, facilitation, the best thing that you can do is, not involve yourself in the he said, she said, like go ask mom, go ask dad, is to get people talking to each other because goodness knows we're all so busy. So, to help people really talk it through when a problem is bubbling, and so, if need to, take yourself some mentoring classes or some mediation classes so that if you need to, you can bring people in your office or to the conference room if you don't have an office and help them, lead them to, person A to talk to person B and then person B talk to person A so that we can work through this as adults at the lowest level before it rises to the point of conflict. And if you can model that and if you can be consistent with that practice, it's amazing how you can get that team working together as a well-oiled machine. Now, it's not going to be perfect, and it does take a lot of practice and effort, but eventually it does free up time in the time management sphere because you get your team members really working through the conflict when it's, at a 1 instead of when it gets up to a 7 or an 8. And they know that you're not going to involve yourself and solve it for them.
No. We're finishing up here right now, and this our team reminded me this is the 52nd show that we're having. So a full 1 year of doing shows. So Sheri, thank you so much for joining us today. And
you're welcome.
I've got a question that I'd like to ask you that I've asked for the last 51 guests, which is if S2 Verify were to conduct a background investigation of you, would there be any surprises?
Oh my goodness. I have never had a top secret clearance in any role that I've had, but I feel certain I would be able to get that if you were to run my background check.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for your time today. And, for our listeners that want to connect with you and hear more about what you're doing in this space, where should they look?
Well, I have a website, Pulse, like in your body, pulseHRsolutions.com. And then I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me at linkedin.com/N Sheri-Bender.
That's great. And now I'd like to have a minute with my partners, Bill and Jim at S2 Verify. Bill, let's talk about a topic that we're hearing more and more about from our medium to larger size clients, which is the topic of integrating our reporting with their systems. I know that we encounter this quite often. So let's talk about that topic.
Yeah, so there's literally thousands probably of applicant tracking systems out there. There's predominantly probably 100 that control most of the market. And so an applicant tracking system allows them to be able to get the data from the applicant. But what they like is the ability to take and push that information over to, company CRAs like S2 Verify without having to do dual data entry. And so we're integrated into 60 plus of these applicant tracking systems. And so we have the ability to do an integration through, basically an XML interchange. And so they're just capturing, the name, the social, the address, the pertinent information. And so when they make a conditional offer, then they can just push a button in the applicant tracking system and it comes into our system via electronic XML exchange, orders the package, and then we complete the background check and send them a token basically that they can click on, which allows them to view the background check outside of the applicant tracking system. The good thing is we already have experience with most of the major applicant tracking systems. What most companies don't understand is although we know the roadmap, we still have to go through and do the actual programming, and we have to rely on the applicant tracking system and their employees to actually do, their process. And so a lot of times it gets caught up in the applicant tracking system actually, putting that into their queue and, moving forward. For us, we were pretty nimble on getting it done, but we're often waiting on the applicant tracking systems to get that integration done.
For our audience, please tune in next week when we continue our exploration of topics critical to success in HR. We'll see you then. And it goes without saying, let's get America back to work because dreams only work if we do. Thanks so much, Sheri. Appreciate you joining today.
Thank you.
If you want to stay abreast of HR, recruiting, and hiring trends, tips, and tools, make sure you subscribe to America Back to Work. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating and a review.